This is the There Is Another Way podcast from spencerbruce.com.
Making life work as a creative.
You have your voice, and be it a guitar player, a filmmaker, a photographer, whatever bit of gear you use, there'll be a slight variation maybe on the colour or the tone, just slightly. But
exactly, it's not going to be night and day, is it?
No.
I mean, you can use an analog camera, you can use a digital camera. It's not about that. It's about your framing. It's about what you see. As a guitar player or a musician, it's about what you hear. You think, I want to hear this. As a painter, it's what you visualise in and it will change a little bit what you use. And what you play or what but it's essentially just make sure you got something that doesn't get completely in the way of what you want to do. If you want to sound like Steve Vai, maybe not get a jazz chorus and a Gibson L5.
Perhaps
that's going to be difficult to get that work. I'm not saying it's impossible, but you'll make that a long and difficult journey for yourself. Get something that doesn't get in the way too much. Yeah. But other than that, I really don't think it matters much.
But as you said, it's like, why should you want to sound like Steve Vai? Want to sound like you.
Oh, yeah. But if you think, that's how things should sound. I think it's a natural thing to look to. Most people start with these things when they're relatively young, and I think it's absolutely natural to look for a mentor or a peer or somebody you think, well, this is great. My dad said to me when he realised this guitar business wasn't going to go away, when he came home from the library and said, if you want to play guitar, you got to know about Chet Atkins and you got to know about Les Paul. And that's not how I wanted to sound, really. I wanted something that's maybe sang a little bit more. Where you get a bit of an idea. I knew I didn't want to sound like Hendrix because I thought that was too noisy. That was, and so it had to be something that had a bit of a tone to it. I was never much of a rebel, to be honest with you. I've been too fortunate to have anything properly to rebel against. So I've always become more sort of an introspective kind of thinking, pondering kind of chap, and so anything sort of to do with punk and all that was just a bit too sort of
angry.
yeah, I think you're right, because the anger thing, and some people create, like Tarantino. I'm not a massive Tarantino fan. I'm much more of a Kubrick kind of guy myself, which kind of illustrates perfectly what I'm talking about with the guitar thing, because, he's not going to... It's never bad looking. It might be scary and frightening and all that, but it's always beautifully framed and beautifully lit. Even the Clockwork Orange thing is a... If you can distance yourself from what's actually going on the screen, it's a pretty film from an aesthetic point of view. It's a terrible film in terms of what they're actually doing and all of that. But, I always wanted, I don't mind playing some nasty intervals and some weird chords and stuff, but I always want to have a relatively nice sound to do it with.
I love the guitar, obviously. I did for a period want to be an Iron Maiden, and I probably still do if I got the chance. But I'm not sure I really fully would want to commit to that lifestyle because, as you know, I also enjoy sound, and that's what probably more than I probably should, and it's a little bit unhealthy obsession with sound and sound manipulation and the technical side of it, and very much like you, there was two kind of momentous moments. One was reading an article before I even really knew who Peter Gabriel was or Genesis or anything like that, because I was too into metal, talking about, again, having his little sound studio that he had put together. This was before Real World or anything like that. And sampling, talking about sampling. I was like, that's amazing. Wow. Just, I could put a microphone in a bathroom and record something. And, that to me was just like the coolest thing, and it still is today. It excites me more than anything.
That's funny, because that's I just want to interject here. That's where we completely differ, because I'm thinking, well, why would you make it sound bad out there? Because you've got a great sounding room in here. Put it in there, record it properly.
But I'm not talking about recording normal things. I'm not talking about.
No, I know, but even so, because I think it's. I think I'm more of a jazzer than I first thought, because for me, well, it is about creating stuff, but it is about, there's a recreation element of, well, there's a great sounding drum. It's not, oh, we'll put it through this, then it'll sound even weird. I don't know. It's very interesting.
Well, I think, so to tie it into where this kind of followed on from, there was a momentous moment in my life, which, again, it sounds very grandstone, but it changed everything. It changed the course of my life, and it's how I've ended up here. And it was one just boring school morning, music class. And up until that point, a lot of music had been, the usual stuff, classical, all the things you get taught at school. And at this point, we had a relatively new music teacher, and to me, she's like probably the biggest influence in my life, particularly of my journey in my life, even though I've never had a chance to thank her. So if she, a small chance she's listening to this, I'd like to.
If she's listening out there,
I'd like to thank her. I doubt it, but my deepest,
Wouldn't it be
thanks.
great if she was?
Yeah. She brought in some Steve Reich, so kind of Pierre Schaeffer and John Cage. And to me, that changed everything, because it's going to sound stupid in hindsight when I say it, but this little light bulb went off on this 13-year-old, 14-year-old boy's head of like, so sound is music and music is sound. And that is where I am today. That's led my journey through life. And I think I'm more excited and interested in that, and probably have been then, playing to being an Iron Maiden. No, maybe not. But
I was always too embarrassed, and I still am to a certain extent. I go on stage and I'm thinking, it's that energy exchange. You see, and this is going to sound insanely hippie, but I suppose that is what I am. And actually, funnily enough, a lot of those hippies weren't. But I don't like the adoration. Yeah, I'm not comfortable with that. I love sharing the fact that we both like guitars. I love pop kicks for that reason, because you get to know people a little bit. You can have a chat with them. It's not that whole big and them and us kind of thing. And they, oh yeah, we love guitars. That's great. I love guitars, but this is what I do. And if they like it, it's brilliant. It's wonderful to share. But this whole thing, and I think it probably comes back to me wanting to be, top dog, impressing everybody or the guitarists. I've kind of grown out of that completely, but I was always naturally very uncomfortable with the whole, the whole audience thing, because it's like, who the hell am I to take your time to? I'm standing here, But if we're sharing in this piece of music, then it's different. I think actually that's one of the big reasons why the Thin Lizzy thing was so much fun, because it was like, we all love Thin Lizzy, let's celebrate, and that was it, I think that's obviously why you're a replacement, because you were my replacement, because I have exactly the same feeling to this day. I feel quite uncomfortable with it. That doesn't mean I don't appreciate it, and I'm very, I realise how much it takes for someone to come up and say something, but at the same time, I really don't know how to deal with it, and makes me feel slightly uncomfortable, because it's like I'm not, I'm just enjoying the music that I'm playing to you. That's all I need from this. And I mean, it's great when people say they like it and stuff. It's wonderful.
It's just it doesn't really gel with me, though. It's like, and you have a strategy to deal with it. You go, oh, thanks a lot, that's great. I really appreciate it and everything like that. And but it's like, I just want to go back to playing the guitar now.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's I'm not an introvert in any way, shape or form, because I do like, I used to lecture back at university as well, and don't half mind talking, I'll wrap it on, and I've got no problem with addressing 200 people or something. Not in the slightest. It's fine. In fact, I feel more comfortable rabbiting on in my fusion days with the aforementioned trio. It was sort of like a bad combination of not stand up, because it wasn't funny, but it was just me talking. And then the drummer would go, come on, let's get playing, let's put it out. Yeah, and another thing happened. Funnily enough, on the way down here, and and I was just, and I, and people, they actually, I think, well, I could be wrong, but judging from the reaction, they quite enjoyed it as well, because it was, I think that's one of my biggest strengths, actually, as a producer, is I'm not frightening. I'm disarming myself and any sort of threat that, I do not believe in this whole, what's his name, with the funky hair, Phil Spector, that you have to be scared of the producer. I don't think anything good comes from that at all. I do appreciate some people have got results with scaring people into do certain things. That's not how I want to get results. It's not the person I want to be.
Yeah, I guess
it's not the karma I want to, put on my karmic accounts. I want people to express themselves from a place of joy and happiness and content.
Yeah, that takes us back to the film world. There's countless examples of directors purposefully putting actors in scary position. I haven't got a problem telling people to shape up and stuff, but that's not for the studio, because you can't do that at sort of that's in the moment. Different, yeah. Think, go home. I mean, this is why I'm a terrible guitar teacher, because people will come, because I have tried it, people come and go, oh, can I have a lesson? Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not very good, but please do. And they'll come and they'll play, and I'll say, well, yeah, okay, I like what you're doing there. That's quite clever. That says, you maybe work a bit on that. Your fingering there is a bit odd, and that could cause you a problem. And now go away for a year. Yeah. And check that out and come back to me. That's not a viable business plan. Yeah, I think that's why my private tuition has not really succeeded too well. Similar things, and also just no one seems to want to learn the guitar.
I don't know about that. I think it's quite pop. I mean, I think they're selling loads of the things.
Well, my experience around with the kids I've been teaching has been they want to play, and they want to play Ed Sheeran and stuff like that, and they'll give it 3 weeks and then they'll just give up. And you get the same pattern. The phone call comes in, just, I can't make it this week, but I'll see you next week.
I've always, I suppose that the part of the production side of things is teaching.
Yeah.
You can imagine me rabbiting on to, but it's all about getting people to get them to understand what it is they're trying to do, and maybe be a little bit more conscious about it, in order for us then to forget all about that and be totally unconscious, not unconscious, but let the subconscious rule when we actually deliver. The performance, or the whatever it is that we're doing, to try and make that. And I think, digital recording it's fantastic for that, because you can do 100 takes. There's no need to ever sound tense ever again. You just to do 100 takes, and then, when I do vocals, I do a lot of takes, and then I compile. Because I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'd much rather compile myself a vocal from 50 takes. 50 takes is a bit excessive, but you know what I mean.
That's quite excessive.
Than use autotune, for instance, because I don't like the sound of autotune. I haven't got a problem with it but I just don't like it. Sort of flattens everything and makes it slightly 2D to my ears, a bit like Melodyne. Melodyne less so, but there's certain things you can just hear when you get your ear attuned to it. You can just hear it immediately. It's a bit like the old DX7 as a Rhodes thing. You think, oh, that sounds great. It sounds better than a Rhodes. We used to say that. I remember when it came out. Oh, that's better than Rhodes. Sell the Rhodes. You think, oh yeah, and now it's just like, oh God, there's another one of those. And it's a bit the same with the autotune stuff. But I essentially just want people to be in a position where they can sound as if they just came in off the street and nailed it. You just knocked it out of the park. Exactly the same thing that you used to get from people touring an album for about 7-8 months before they recorded it. Of course they knew their parts. And that's, again, going back to where the magic is in this. a lot of the magic came from the fact that they had great material and they knew it inside out, and they'd played it with a headache, they'd played it with a hangover, they played it with while being off their heads on whatever stuff, they played it with a heartache, they played, you can do it in any situation because you've already done that. And then you come in and the studio is not quite so intimidating anymore because you just play the same thing again, which means you can get to the magic more easily. Now, nobody has the opportunity these days of touring an album for 8 months or a year before recording it. It just doesn't happen like that anymore. Very, very, very rarely. Perhaps, the aristocrats or somebody, or people who tour incessantly, but, it's very rare. So this idea that we can go in and record these things like we did in the old days, well, you find me a band that can play like they did in the old days, I can record it. The problem is you can't because people haven't got that intimacy with the material that they used to have. But one way we can circumvent that is by doing tons and tons of takes. And getting used to it and doing it again and talking and then doing it again and then doing it next week perhaps or whatever, whenever we again, we're not on lockdown. I click 2 buttons on my thing here and we've got exactly the same thing. I mean lockdown, as in a buyout of a studio.
Yes.
We can do it on not the kind of lockdown we are on, but... and we got total recall. We can start off exactly where we are. I thought about a week at home thinking about what it actually is that this vocal wants to do and what the song wants. Well, that's the equivalent of, touring for maybe a couple of days or whatever. You get that same knowledge and intimacy with the material.
It's funny you mentioned that. It's something that came up last week. Actually, quite a few engineers talking about the old tape days, and actually one of the pluses of it. There's so many negatives about tape, but one of the pluses is the rewind time. Actually, the rewind after a take time was literally the 30 seconds a minute where you could just think back to what you just heard. Think about how you want to approach it again.
I don't. I'm much more of a... When I play, there's not a lot of brain activity going on, honestly. There really isn't, and I don't mean that...
Oh, no, so I meant from a production engineering perspective, as opposed to when you're just looping round, you're not really... It's just happening that they're feeling that if you've got to rewind a song to the beginning, you've got some time to just take into what you heard.
I rarely loop, actually. I very rarely loop. I may have a cycle thing going, but I'll stop and then I'll start again. Because the loop thing, it's all about the flow through the song, like your Steve Vai thing. Yeah. First time we played like this, then with a slide, then with a bit of vibrato, and then with a bit more. And the Scandinavian way is very much... Okay, let's do all the choruses. I would do all the choruses. Then let's do all the verses. Then let's do the middle eight. I rarely do that. But again, that's because if I'm working with a singer-songwriter who is telling a story, I want to hear that development in the story. And I find that it's, going back to that word, it's more authentic if you can get the storyteller to tell the whole story from the beginning instead of just go, jump to the bit where the bears come home. Oh yeah, and then the bears, you don't get the same as if you have the build up. And I feel that you get much more of a choice and you get more of a consistent choice, and weirdly, more of a consistent choice with more variation, if that makes sense. Yeah. Then if you just go, all right, let's do 15 choruses here, and then I'll compile, the best one, then we'll do one for the left and one for the right, and then we got a nice, thick, sort of Scandi vocal, which is great, brilliant, if that's what you want to do. If you got a single man or woman who's telling a story, I don't think that's the best way to get it across.
What do you see as barriers to... as I refer to it, there is another way lifestyle, or let's call it the freelance lifestyle for anyone out there?
Well, there's no security, of course. Yeah. There's no safety net. That is a problem if you... again, growing up in Denmark, we're very much about the safety net for ourselves and for everybody else. And it took me quite a bit of time to get used to the fact that if nobody calls... or emails or whatever they do nowadays, and there's no work, well, that's it. There's no work. psychologically, that can be quite debilitating for some people because they tense up and they don't function as well in those circumstances. And it takes a bit of getting used to. It takes a bit of getting used to the fact that you think, well, okay, something will turn up. That's not the Danish approach to anything. As I sometimes say to my family to annoy them a little bit, which I do quite a bit. When my forefathers set sail for the Americas, you don't go such a long way on essentially a bit of a plank with a bit of a sail without having thought this through to a certain extent. You need to think about, well, okay, how are we going to make, provisions because we might be away for, months, or how is all this going to work? But at the same time, you do have to have a bit of trust and faith in the fact that you can just jump into this. And I think it's as with everything else, it's a balance thing where you have to have faith that something will turn up and sort of, and you have to have an open mind. I think that's from a practical point of view. I mean, I do all sorts of things. That's brilliant for me because I get bored quite easily. I like variation. I do mixing, I do mastering, I do guitar sessions, of course. I do production. I do voiceover. If you buy a John Deere tractor in Denmark, I am on the accompanying DVD telling you how the whole thing works and how to hook up your spreader at the back, and I love it. I mean, I think I've done Microsoft Xbox stuff, and I think it's great. It may have dawned on you. I don't mind talking.
No, it's
not even if it's from a script.
No, it's.
I think it's fun, but I never thought I'd be doing that. I had no idea.
No, but it's part of the journey. I think my journey is totally strange. The things that I've done, and I always talked quite a lot on this podcast about the idea of pots, like income stream pots.
Yeah,
I think to say out and out that I would earn all my money from guitar playing would just be ludicrous.
Yeah, but I think that's a big part of it because a lot of people feel that you should be doing only one thing. A lot of people have trouble with the fact that I've got a guitar and a bass and think, well, hold on a second, are you a guitar player or a bass player? I think, well, I'm a guitar player, but I like playing the bass. I think what there is something wrong with is, well, of course, it's completely individual. But if you feel that every time you're not doing exactly that, like, for instance, playing the guitar, you're wasting your time. This is not it. This is not what I wanted to do. I'm very fortunate. I can find pleasure in doing all of these things quite easily. I like doing voiceovers for whoever did. I think it's fun. I like editing voiceovers, which I do a lot as well for other people. I like mixing, I like mastering, but it's if you can mentally get adjusted to the fact that it's all the real deal, the main event, then I think you've got much more of a chance of making it work. Again, going back to the authenticity thing, because people can tell immediately if that's something he does on the side.
Yeah. No, I think, I say I've got this concept of pots, and I know my income stream comes from a variety of different pots, and sometimes that fluctuates, where it might be the guitar earning more, or teaching earning more, or like mixing or mastering or audio work being more. And I'm fine with that. And I think for anyone out there listening who's thinking about freelancing or starting a career, which is, the whole idea of this podcast in it inspiring you, is that it's fine to do these other things, and you probably will have to do these other things.
No, I don't think you have to. I think that's do what you love doing, and make sure you do what you love. What I'm saying is, like, when you're starting out, if you're jumping into this from, say, another career, and you're trying to follow your ambition to be an artist or whatever it is, I think at some point that you have to realize that you might have to take income from other streams. Oh, absolutely. But again, I don't think there's a problem in that.
No, that's what I mean. That's what the message I'm trying to convey. It's not that you're failing, or it's not that you're not achieving. It's just that whatever it is you're trying to do, whatever business you're starting to start up, that you will have to possibly diversify to start with, and maybe you'll get more enjoyment out of that as well.
Well, you see, that being a Gemini and I diversify for me is a plus word. Great.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of anything. I mean, I love playing the guitar, but I like reading as well, and I like I like variation. This is why I married a Brazilian woman. It's a little bit of everything.
It's funny you should say that, because that leads kind of actually directly into the next question, which I had. So maybe it's a good time to ask it. Is what would be your dream gig, stroke job, stroke situation? Maybe you've just already answered it.
Do you know? Apart from the impending zombie apocalypse and all of that, I'm actually quite happy. I like playing the guitar. I love I love playing with Liam because there's a lot of free. It's like jazz, but without too many chords, and there's singing in there as well. Yeah. So you're playing all this sort of rock and roll, country, honky tonk stuff, but you get loads of time and opportunity. There's a bit of funky stuff in there as well. You can let riff as a guitar player. It's fun. You can, but it's not too restricted, and you don't have to. I can't. I get lost very quickly in chords and stuff like that. It's always been too complicated for me. I really have tried, but never quite. I mean, I love chords, but see, I'm one of those because I'm not that trained. I can only really play what I can hear. And if I can't hear it, I haven't got a backlog of scales and stuff that I can fall back on if I don't know what to play. Of course, I can play a Mixolydian scale, and that'll fit with pretty much anything. Happy days. And if that doesn't fit, you just throw in a bit of chromatic stuff, and then you like who was it? Mike Stearns, and you're never more than half a note away from where you should have been.
Note, yeah.
It keeps it fresh that you can do pretty much what you want to do, and at the same time there are certain parts that you need to do. I like that variation. If I was doing a gig where I had to play the same part, I mean, I can see why people start doing drugs and drinking, because they get bored. So there has to be that slight freedom in it. It's a terrible thing. Well, it's not a terrible thing. I'm happy doing what I do. I love my studio. I love the place we live. I love the fact that it's in the house. I mean, when we moved up here, I very much sort of thought, well, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to have because I used to have the studio in the house, of course, down in London, because that was all we could have. There was nowhere else to put it. Now here we actually have got an opportunity. I could have built a shed down the back of the garden and put it there, but I deliberately put it in the house because I know what I'm like. If I built a shed and they'd never see me, I would have no idea about what's going on as a family unit. I'd come up here for a wee or whatever, that would be it, or to eat, and then I go back there. But now, because it's at the heart of it's up the stairs actually, but it's right next to my wife's room, what we call the Queen's Chamber. Oh yeah, it's not pretentious at all. It's great, and I love that. I can hear when I open the window. I can hear my grandchild running around. I can hear things happening. I'm part of it, and yet I'm at work. It's great. It's brilliant. If I did win, I don't play the lottery, but if I did. If I made it, which is another thing I'd like to get to in a second, what that actually means, I wouldn't go and build a massive studio somewhere. I mean, I can't track drums in here. It's not big enough. But if I need to track drums, I'll go somewhere else and I'll track drums there and I'll bring it all back here. I honestly don't want to move, even if I could. I mean, I can't imagine. In my mind, I can't imagine what I should find that would be better than this.
Yeah.
And if that's my point when you talk about having made it. And I'm not, I hope I'm not coming across as if I'm bragging or anything. I'm just happy. I'm just happy and content.
That's one of the most important messages to get across is there is this externalism of idea that unless you're doing X, Y, Z, then you haven't achieved. And a lot of what the previous podcasts have been talking about is it just, what is it that you want? Where is your happiness? And that's all you need to achieve. And actually, when you look at it that way, you can start to find out that potentially the financial side of things does not have to be as much as you need. And when you've got to that point as well, you don't need maybe as much income because you're not having to spend stuff on frivolities that you don't need because you're miserable in your life. And I know a lot of people, you know, they need to have a big income because they're buying stuff to compensate for them not being happy.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you wake up in the morning and you think, oh, hello, do it all again, great.
Yeah.
We're still here. I think you've made it. I don't think it's. I mean, I've got a Mac Pro from 2008, and I wouldn't mind upgrading it at some point, but it does the trick. It's certainly not. If I look at what's going on and what I'm producing, there's no way I can sensibly look at myself in the eye and say, no, the problem is the Mac Pro. That's what's holding us back here, guys.
Yeah.
It's that old computer. It does everything I want it to do. It's quite, I mean, I can't upgrade to the latest version of anything, but it would be, and I think, you know, marrying meeting and marrying my wife has and also, you know, has taught me a lot in that respect, because they have a different view on material goods in Brazil because they are a poor country. And it's not just a question of course they're very rich people in Brazil as anywhere else, but they have a different view at it. Like, for instance, I wanted a pair of driving gloves for Christmas, sort of Alan Partridge style, and it was a sort of ironic gift.
Yeah.
And my wife got me those and gave them to me and didn't get the ironic side of it at all. She thought, because it hadn't entered her mind that somebody would actually want to put a thing on the list that was just for a bit of fun, because her mind doesn't work like that. And it was very, very sobering, because I thought, well, actually, I'm a bit of a, this is terrible, really. So I'm taking something here that some people have put some sort of value into creating, and I'm using it as a vehicle for my irony.
Yes.
That is ridiculous. And I felt really bad. I used them because now I'm thinking, well, yeah, and I'm very happy with them. But the whole sort of irony side of it, it's got to go, as far as I'm concerned. It's no good to me. And the same with you know, various bits of equipment. You look yourself in the eye and say, what do I actually need to be as creative as I possibly can? And that sits very well with I mean, I'm from quite a sort of a, we weren't rich in any way, shape or form when I grew up. And my parents were quite frugal, and I come from a part of Denmark that's historically, you know, quite frugal, and I like it. I like austerity in the sense that I like not going overboard. What I don't like, of course, is some people getting insanely rich off other people's austerity. I find that even more distasteful. But, you know, I like, one of the things we did when we moved up here was we tried to minimize all the expenses as much as we possibly could. So, in other words, buy as little as you have to on credit, because it's just going to cost you. There's no way around it. I've got an old car that I think it's from 2002 that I bought for £790 cash, which means if we're under lockdown, which of course I didn't see coming, but it's just standing there. The only thing I'm paying is you know, insurance and car tax, which anybody has to pay. But I'm not actually, if I'm not using it, it's just sitting around. And the same with everything else. You really need a Paul Reed Smith guitar, another one, but this time in flamed maple. Is that really going to make? I mean, I usually have a chat now. It's getting a little bit guitar-y again, but it'll translate, I think. I've got people who ask me, what kind of guitar should I buy? And I say, well, you know, I'm looking at this £2,500 custom shop, whatever, very lovely, fantastic guitar. Or I could buy this £500 made in Mexico Fender. And I always say, you buy the one that you want, of course, because that's what they're going to do anyway. But I bet you, if you buy the cheap one and then take the extra £2,000, and for that £2,000 you buy yourself time to play on the cheap one, I bet you any money that the cheap one would sound better when you've done that than the expensive one would have done had you bought that and put it in a corner and gone to work.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more on that. As someone, again, maybe fortunate enough to have a few guitars in my collection, which I'm now looking at, but ultimately, they're not that expensive. And you love them more.
Yeah, I've got no problem with expensive guitars, and some of them are stunning. It just doesn't work for me. I mean, I can't. I've got the amp that I've got is a clone of a Dumble amp. Dumble amp, for those who don't know, were built by a chap called Howard Alexander Dumble. He only built about 300, and they cost. I mean, they're being sold online now for about £140,000. That kind of. I mean, you could buy a house. I could not. Yeah. I mean, I don't care what it sounds like. I can't do that. It's like driving, and it probably is a very Scandinavian thing, I suppose. But it's like driving around in a Rolls Royce, throwing out pennies to homeless people on the street. I can't. It just doesn't sit right with me. I went to LA when I was 25. My parents gave me a trip to LA because I finished my university studies, and it was great. And I went out there to visit a friend who was studying at GIT at the time. And if I'd gone out there as a 17-year-old, I might have really loved it and wanted to stay. But I just could not get round the fact I couldn't be comfortable in a place where you go down a street and you can buy, 24 karat frame for your number plate, or real Persian rugs for the back of your car, or for the inside of your doghouse or whatever. And outside there's a poor bastard with no legs on a trolley trying to just survive from one day. I can't deal with that. It's bad enough in England, and it's a lot less up here. Up north, it's a bit more balanced, apart from which if you go to Cheshire, where all the footballers are, it doesn't sit well with me. I don't like it. I use some sort of communist people who, I don't know. I just, if you feel, I don't think that feeling good and being comfortable and thriving as a person is down to you alone. You're not just going to thrive. You're going to thrive a lot more if your neighbor is thriving as well, and the neighbor on the other side. And you don't have these insane, what do you call them, sort of polarities going on. I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah, no,
it might be clear now.
Totally. And again, you can again extrapolate that up into, the sense, getting slightly political here, but again, companies not paying their fair share of tax and all those kind of things.
Absolutely. Absolutely, you can.
Overall inequality that there is. Okay.
Again, the thing I don't understand with that is how you can. I mean, it's like you see these ads on before your YouTube video starts. Hey, I'm selling this on Amazon, and you know what? I bought this. I'm selling these for £40, say, and I bought them for 25 pence. And how you could? I mean, that to me it's nothing to do with business. That's just ripping people off. I can't be doing with that. It's like saying, well, you booked me to go and play at this gig. I'm going to send someone else because, what, as if you know the difference. I know you want me, but this is such and such, and it's a terrible analogy. but
there's a curious insight there.
Okay, let me just go off on one here, but again, as if I hadn't already. But the stock market. I find that repulsive. The fact that somebody can sit and actually become rich on moving stuff around, whereas the actual value that's added has nothing to do with them at all. You know, if somebody hires me to mix a track, I mix the track. The value that's added to that track, hopefully, on a good day, is added by me, and it's worth a certain. It's a bit like when people say, "How much do you charge?" Well, I say to them, and it's the honest truth. We find some sort of balance. This is an exchange of energy, whereby you have to feel that you would want to call me again, provided, of course, the result is as you want. Call me again for the next one, and I am happy to pick up your call. That's all we need to find that balance. It's not. That's it. And of course, when you lower your expenses as much as you can make these decisions more easily. Another way of doing it is what I've done previously as well, is saying, well, you know, how much this is going to take me 2 days to do. How much do you charge for 2 days of your work? The idea behind that being that I don't think necessarily that it's fair that a Norwegian oil millionaire should pay the same as somebody who works in a factory in Brazil. If they want, you know, because that's the great thing. That's one thing we haven't touched on, but of course, because we take it for granted, the internet. I've done a guitar session earlier today, actually yesterday, for some chaps in Melbourne. I've mixed for people all over the world, and the same with the mastering, and it's just magical. And the fact that you can do that is just, mind-blowing. Completely mind-blowing.
That's a fantastic kind of thing about this progressive payment structure. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it's not. If what you want to do is to maximize your income, then it's not particularly clever. Because I'm sure I could get more. But it's for me, it's all about energies. And to an exchange of energy, there's musical energy, there's financial energies, and I don't want to. I always feel that if you receive more than you deserve, I don't think that's particularly good for you, spiritually or in any other way. And I know I'm in the vast minority with this kind of thing because, and I understand that. It's all probably not a view I would have had when I knew instinctively, even when I was in my early 20s or mid-20s, that this whole thing with too much inequality was a bit weird. But, it's easier to have this kind of view when you're turning. I'm turning 54 next time. And you've got a bit more of you think, but even if I had $1 million, I can still only have sausages and chips maximum 3 times a day, and even that's pushing it.
What would be your advice to someone else starting out on a freelance journey?
I would say minimize your expenses as much as you can from a very practical point of view. Make really sensible. And we all know what's sensible and what is the stuff that we convince ourselves is sensible, but make really sensible investment ideas. And that's not to say don't spend any money. I've just poured about £12,000 into this room because I'm in acoustic material and all of that stuff because I'm going to spend the rest of my life here. So I want it to be as good as I can possibly get it, within the restraints of what's possible physically and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So I'm not saying don't spend any money, but spend it wisely because you can only spend it once. You be less focused on the equipment side of things and more focused on the human side of things if you can, because it's difficult, especially if you're just starting out, because people want to see flashing lights and they want to, go into a studio where there's a desk or whatever, and it's easier for somebody like me who's have been at it a little bit longer and have a bit more of a CV and have a bit more of a history, and also have a bit more like, actually, well, if you don't like it, well, that's great, then go somewhere else. That's a harder thing to do when you just start out. I haven't got a desk, I haven't got anything. Factual fact, I want as little as possible in this studio as I can possibly get away with, because I really do think the less you have of that sort of thing, the more your mind. And I mean, I know people who run studios where they have this, different preamps and different mics and all that, and I love it because they know what they're doing with it, and they will make decisions that are correct. For me, it just gets in the way. It just confuses me, and I'll spend, like, for instance, with the guitars, and again, I think that is an analogy that people can use. I would spend all my day restringing the guitars and finding out which one worked for which part and get absolutely nothing done, and then do the same the next day. Whereas if there's only one or two or however many you need, I've got an electric and an acoustic and a 12-string and a bass and a fretless bass. I've got a mandolin and a lap steel and a ukulele. But they're all distinctively, they're like different colors. You see, I'm not saying paint everything in black and white. I'm just saying maybe just have one green, or maybe a light green and a dark green. That way you can also keep your expenses down, which will eventually lead you to having more choices, and it'll be easier for you to make artistic choices that you want to do. Because at the end of the day, we're coming at this from a position of people wanting to be artists, one way or the other, or to facilitate the work of artists, or be independent or self-dependent, or whatever you want to say. There's a freedom element in this whole freelance thing that I think it's insanely important to keep hold of. And whether we like it or not, the main thing that keeps people in various boxes nowadays is financial. It's not politics anymore. It's not religion. You can get a job whether you're Protestant or Catholic or Muslim or whatever. That's not it's not skin color. It's financial at the moment. Now, whether the coronavirus is going to change that, I don't know. But at the moment, it doesn't look like it. So the more freedom you can get yourself, and there's only two ways. You could either make more money or spend less. And of course, there's a limit to how little you can spend. But it does make it a hell of a lot easier to reach the balance sheet into zero if you have less to spend. And it also makes it more fun when you actually spend, because you can spend with a clear conscience. We've all bought stuff. God almighty, I bought stuff where I think, you walk out the shop and you think, oh, what an idiot. Why'd you do that now? You can't go back in, because then you look even more like an idiot, and you have signed it. And we've all been there. I mean, some people, I'm still doing it with plugins sometimes. I'm going to buy that now because I don't really need that. And I've got this, and why,
Oh, plugins, that's another story.
Yeah, it is. Indeed it is. So that's from that point of view. From a point of view of getting the work in, I think be true to yourself, first and foremost. People hire, whether they know it or not, they think they're hiring a desk or a whatever it is, a camera or whatever, but they are hiring you. It's your judgment in whatever you do that essentially is going to set you apart from everybody else. And be true to what you want. I mean, I'm a child of the 70s. Everything I do sound a bit like it's been through it may sound contemporary, but it sounds like it's just been on a little trip in a time machine back to the 70s for a week or two, and then back in, and you think, oh, that's a bit funny. But it's what I like to hear. That's how I want things to. I want things to sound big and warm. I don't want them to sound pointy and that's not what I'm about. If people want that, they'll go somewhere else anyway, because people who want that sound will be better at getting it than I am. Yeah. So be true to what it is that you think. Don't be that. I'm not saying about that. Don't be not flexible, because that's something completely different. Be open-minded. But make sure you know where your foundation is, and if you're not quite, shaped. Sorry. Yeah, carry on.
I was just going to say, this is constant advice I keep giving my students. Is one of the things is to find what I would call your niche, and be that guy, or girl, or person. As in, goes right back to what we first started out talking about, copying guitar players and things. Don't be the second-hand replica of someone else. Be the person who excels in doing the thing that they do, and then other people will come to you because they like the thing that you do.
Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing wrong in studying other people. Maybe it's a bit dangerous when you only study one person, and believe me, I've been down that road a lot. I then switched person, which has been an advantage, so you get a little bit of different stuff. But study as broadly as you can, learn as much as you can, learn as many of the rules as you can, and then at some point, and it'll come naturally, you move on to something else that then eventually becomes your own identity. At the same time, don't overthink it. It's the same thing again. You can open the door, you can open the window, and you can wait for the muse to come in. You can put a candle in the window. You can put a bit of essence, oils in. You can try and make it a welcoming place for her, but you can't shout her in. That's not going to work. So open yourself to the fact that sometimes these things don't happen on command, but work on actually making yourself able to make them happen on command as much as possible, even when it's not happening, if that makes sense.
That is absolutely awesome advice. And I think that's a good point to wrap up for now, but we're definitely going to continue this conversation. All it's left for me to say is thank you. I'm so touched at the amount of time you've given to the podcast. It's
been my pleasure.
Fascinating. And yes, we will hear more from you soon. So in the words of our
buckle down,
Prime
brace
Minister,
yourselves.
Stay alert. So thank you very much, and watch this space. More coming from the podcast. Most importantly, everyone out there, take care of yourselves, and we'll catch you later.